I'm Errin Pedersen, Brooke Young, Stephanie Costa. We also had Marisa Snyder from BYU on our team, and she had a class that she needed to be at this afternoon, so we are presenting in her absence, but she really helped us on this program or project. So I'm going to turn the time over to Brooke, and we'll get started.
Okay, so just to remind people a little bit about what we were doing. This project all started, I was currently sort of in charge of the periodicals department at the main library, and we had this obituary index that was heavily used and it was falling apart. And we didn't know what to do. And ILEAD came about the same time that I was starting to ask questions about it. So we sort of put the two together. When we put this team together, literally none of us knew anything about digitizing. We were like, I'm in teen services, Errin is in adult services, and Stephanie is sort of has a teen services background, but is currently running the Riverside Library, and none of us had any idea what we were getting into, like at all. Starting with, we didn't even know where the obituary index came from. It has no copyright information. It indexes just the Salt Lake Tribune and the Deseret News obituaries from the 1800s to 1970. And it was clearly put together by a bunch of volunteers, but we didn't know anything about it. And like I said, we didn't know anything about digitization at all, and we didn't even know what we needed to know. And so it seemed like a really easy project, because it was only 60 roles or so. It seemed like an easy project to sort of get started on, and then so we could leapfrog into bigger conversations about other things we wanted to digitize. And we also realized that we needed a lot of sort of tech support to do the projects we wanted to do, but we needed a way to sort of learn about those products and what we needed to know.
All right, did I go too far? Okay, so our goals for the project, like Brooke said, the index was falling apart, and that's partly due to its age, but partly due to the fact that it's heavily used and well loved by our patrons. So one of our goals was getting a new physical copy of those 60 rolls of microfilm, but also we wanted to make it more discoverable, not just for those patrons, but for patrons who don't know about the index at all. So one of our goals was to get it in the catalog so that people could find it or stumble upon it. And then another goal of ours was to figure out kind of the questions we needed to ask in terms of how would we want this to look in a digital format when we get to that point. Is it going to be just transcribing each card to make sure that we don't have mistakes, or is it going to be uploading digital images? So we had lots of questions that we didn't even know, like Brooke said, that we needed to ask. So we found out along the way kind of what some of those questions were, and then we had to start thinking like, how is this going to be possible? So, and then also in relationship to getting a digital copy of it or having it digitally accessible, we had to think about the metadata. So that was one of our goals, was trying to understand what we needed to know for getting that metadata, what the scheme would be. And then another big part of that is how we're going to host this in the future. At the time that ILEAD started, we didn't have any digital library product for our website. We had no digital collection. So we started thinking about Omeka and different products. But then in August, we got Polaris as our new ILS, and that kind of defined where we were going to maybe go to house future digital projects. So we had to think about where this was going to live eventually and where future digital library projects that the city created were going to live.
Yeah, why not? So one of the things that really helped us bring this project together was all of the intersessions. We didn't end up doing a lot of the kind of big intersessions where people did webinars or things like that. We ended up kind of creating our own so that we could get information that was really specifically pertinent to our project. So we ended up doing 3 kind of site visits. We went to Brigham Young University. We did a visit at our library where Marisa came up and helped us, and then we went up to Utah State Library, and we'll kind of talk in specifics about what each of those led to.
Okay, so Marisa being from BYU, we thought, and also she is a supervisor in the Digital Initiatives Lab, so we wanted to use her knowledge and her connections there to learn more about how to go forward with this project. So we went down to BYU, that was our first intersession, and we got a tour of their Digital Initiatives Lab, and we got to meet the head of, I think it's the Family History Center Department Chair, Terry Dallin, and we got to sit down and look at this Scan Pro 2000, which is one of the machines that they use, and kind of discuss the pros and cons of that and see volunteers at work doing digitizing. It was really interesting just to see how the process worked and find out from him that there are copyright issues that even they're experiencing, so we needed to think about that in terms of our microfilm and future collections that we have that we want to digitize and where those copyrights are held. So that was going to be a challenge for us. So that was very helpful. In the Digital Initiatives Lab, we got to see the state-of-the-art lab and see all this amazing equipment that they had and kind of find out how their workflows worked, and especially how they were starting to come up with this or use this crowdsourcing method. So they have this transcribe project that they are using reference desk staff that have downtime to take already uploaded images and transcribe them while they have time. So we thought that was a really cool idea, and we knew that we were going to need to use volunteers or possibly a creative solution like that where if staff are kind of working but could possibly be multitasking, that could help us. So visiting BYU was a very important first step for us to think about how we could go about moving forward.
Okay, so our second intersession was actually done at our library, and we did it in technical services and got the microfilm actually in our catalog where it hadn't been previously. This was really fun for me. I don't have a library background, so it was really cool to get into the kind of real back-end library stuff, and I'm finding that I'm kind of a data dork. So it's been really interesting for me to realize that that's where some of my interests lie, where that hasn't been any of the work that I've done previously. So we sat down with one of our catalogers, and we literally put every role into our ILS. We had to wait until we went live with Polaris before we could do this. But so we have an item level record for each roll of film. The way that it's searchable in our ILS is by searching Deseret News, Salt Lake Tribune, Obituary Index, obituaries, and that'll bring it up within our catalog for patrons. It's non-circulating, but again, to this point, it was something that patrons had to know existed or had to be kind of on a quest to periodicals to find. So this was actually a pretty big step for us in terms of making it more accessible for our patrons. And then we had the fun time of, scanning and tagging everything so that it worked with our system. But yeah, this was a really fun part for us.
Okay, so it was clear at that point that we sort of had to tackle the metadata and how we were going to tackle it. And like I said, Marisa was definitely the only one who knew what she was doing at this point. So we went up to Utah State and talked to Liz Walcott, who volunteered generously of her time to sort of sit us through and walk us through sort of the idea of what our metadata could look like and the type of information we needed. We took an example of what the metadata for a digital object from BYU looks like. Hopefully. So this is just one of like 20 sheets of what BYU sort of fills out for a digital object. And this is what they use for the Mountain West Digital Libraries application. And so then we went through each field, sort of deciding what we needed, what kind of things we didn't need, what was important, what wasn't important. And we talked about which fields get mapped where, and it was a lot of like really interesting, really nerdy discussions that that was, I think we all kind of had fun with it. And even if we don't do this exact metadata form and use this exact mapping, with the product that we purchase out of Polaris, it'll be similar enough that I think we can take some of the work that we did and apply it to whatever it is we end up using.
The next part was actually getting permission, getting a copy, all of the major components that would make it fly. So Jim had told us that the archives had a copy of the microfilm and that they had the capacity to do digitize it. So that's kind of where we started in terms of trying to get both a new physical copy for ourselves and to get it digitized. So we got on the phone with them and they said, well, we don't actually have the copyright for that, the church does. So you need to get permission from them first. So then we tried to figure out where within the church history library it actually lived. And so we ended up calling Family Search and a bunch of different phone calls that got us nowhere, because nobody really knew what we were talking about. So Brooke and I ended up just driving down to the Family History Library and getting some in-person help, and that was really, really great. They took us to like 5 different people. Well, this person will help you, and then they didn't know what they were talking about, so another person. And so we talked through a bunch of different people who finally got us over to the church history library. And when we got to the church history library, they said, yeah, we've got a copy, we're happy to give you one. And I'll let Stephanie explain the rest.
Success. So they had a copy, and not only that, they owned the copyright, and it just so happened that at a meeting very near when Brooke and Errin went and talked to them, they had discussed actually digitizing that exact collection. And so they are going to do it, and they're going to give us a copy, and they're going to allow us to link directly to their digital copy so that our patrons can have access to that. So I feel like we kind of got off easy, easy on that one. It took a lot of time and sleuthing to get to that point, but we're very excited that sooner than we would have been able to do at the Church History Library, we'll be able to have that available so that our patrons can use it. And so that kind of sets us in motion, and now we just have to look ahead to the next frontier for digital collections at Salt Lake City.
So just because we didn't end up actually digitizing this collection, it doesn't mean that all of the work we did was in vain. I think we have some real clear steps of things that we can do in the future and things that we have put in motion that will help that. The biggest thing that we did early on was when we got the new ILS, Polaris has a module for digital collections. And we early on made the call to purchase that module, and we even purchased a server to have that module on. So we made a pretty heavy commitment in the technology end of things, at least in the housing of things. In terms of the actual machines to digitize, we still have to work that out. But there are at least 2 or 3 collections that I think will provide a real way to have user-generated content and content that is sort of interesting and specific to Salt Lake City. One of the things that I think we have always done really badly is we have a huge archive of our own history that we have not done anything with. We have slides, we have photos, we have VHS tapes, for the past 100 years that I think would be a really fascinating and awesome digital collection. The other thing that we have, and I talked about this a little bit earlier today, was the zine collection. In 1997, Salt Lake City Public Library started a zine collection, and it was the first zine collection in a public library. And we have never figured out a way to cost-effectively catalog the zine collection or to figure out how to make what we have public in a way that we felt like we could manage. And I think that with doing it sort of in a digital catalog format would be really, really helpful and would actually highlight a lot of the really awesome and rare things we have in that collection. So that is sort of what we have. We also want to thank all of the lovely people that helped us out so much in the past 8 months, however long this has been. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask.
What was your administration? Were they pretty excited about this project?
I think so. I mean, when I took the problem of the microfilm to the administration, Debbie, correct me if I'm wrong, they were really open to having this, and the fact that they put together this team and really has supported this whole year, I think shows that they're interested in doing this. Yeah.
So did you have to use the grant money to get the server space for the digital libraries module?
No, because we had put all of this money in to get a new ILS and to really update all of our stuff. It was built into that budget. Yeah.
It sounds as if you've started a model, something that other libraries could do. Are you looking ahead at being available to help other people get started?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're always open to that. I think that we're still so at the beginning stage that we're happy to do this with anybody else that wants to. Yeah.
Brooke, I think that the zine collection it would be daunting to do. Have you thought about the copyright issues associated with those?
Yeah. So I don't know that we would do the whole zine. I don't know that we would digitize the whole zine, but if you could digitize at least just the fact that we had it and sort of do covers, I'm looking at this as sort of more of a cataloging way to get around creating all the original cataloging and putting them in our catalog. If we could sort of create its own catalog in association with our catalog, I think that's sort of what we're thinking there. Yeah.
Where will you provide the link to, or let's see, where's the link going to reside that's going to go out to the digital obituary?
I assume it will be on our website. We have a section on our website that says newspapers, and I think it says newspapers and obituaries. And so I assume we'll just include that link there.
There's also, as part of Polaris, there's a way to do promoted searches, and I'm assuming also that with the obit index search that does news search, Salt Lake Trib search, the way that you can bring up the hard copy catalog, that we can actually bring up that link, as that's kind of something new that they've added.
I would think that once people find the item record or the bibliographic record for the index, we could have a link there too. Many places will help people find it, of course.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
As a comment, I want to give you kudos for your sleuthing that led to that network. I mean, that was kind of a serendipitous networking experience
It was.
that I'm not sure that the family history or the church department, whatever they call it, would have thought to link with you.
Right.
But by you showing up at the doorsteps, you've got some access points now. Probably wouldn't have.
Right, and they were so lovely. I mean, by the time we finally reached the person that we needed to talk to, she was really, really generous and said that, you know, that our interest would probably make the digitization happen faster. It would bring it up in the queue, and that she would make sure to get back to us. So they were really great.
And it was also really fortuitous. Someone had come talking about it just a couple of weeks before, and if we hadn't come at the time that we did, it A, wouldn't have been in the queue, but B, probably would have been more difficult to track down. So the timing just worked out really well.
Yeah.
So are you willing to share your link with other organizations? I'm thinking, I'm at Salt Lake County and we just had some questions about this very thing. So if you can share that link.
Yeah, I mean,
Society, you know, all of us.
The church history library told us that it would not be behind a wall or anything. So I assume that you can just take it off their website. And so as soon as we have the link, we'll share it. Yeah. All right, thanks, guys.